Hey everybody, it's Elisa from Moonstruck Vintage. I'm coming to you from my living room. And I'm just wearing something really special today. This is something that people ask me once in a while. Like, how do you not keep everything you find? Because you seem to love everything that you find to sell in your store. And it is so true because it's hard for me to let go of certain things. This particular item is it's a silk robe. It's kind of a patchwork of multiple fabrics, and I'll show you a little bit more. I don't know its origins. I'm assuming it's Indian. It even has an absolutely gorgeous inside as well. And this is one of the things I found, and I just couldn't sell, at least not yet. But look at the beautiful fabrics. And again, like I said, all silk, has pockets, and it's a great robe, but it would be absolutely beautiful to wear just over a black outfit or jeans and a t-shirt. It's just so cool, so beautiful. I'm coming to you today because I want to share a few stories with you. Now, the purpose of this video is not to be afraid or scared or worry about me and or be over dramatic, but I often wonder about this myself, and I know people ask me about it often too. It's about my safety while I'm working in my store. I do work there primarily by myself, and when I've had employees, they work there by themselves as well. So it's something I'm always thinking about, because when you're alone, you might appear to be vulnerable. And so that's something you really have to consider. So I'm going to come to you today with 3 times in my store that I've actually been afraid. Majority of the time, I'm not afraid, and rarely am I afraid. So imagine in 10 years, there's really only 3 stories that I can share with you. And one of them doesn't even directly affect me, but it happened in my neighborhood. So I only share these things because I want to point out to you what I did in reaction to these scenarios. Because you think most people kind of develop a plan or figure out how they want to handle a situation. They think they know how they'll react in these cases. And you don't react in the way you expect. You react mostly instinctively, and that's really the most important thing, is to trust your gut and believe in yourself, and know that you'll do the right thing when the time comes. Now, it's great to have a plan, and I have a plan. I have a few plans depending on the scenario. And I won't go into too much detail here because giving away that information kind of defeats the purpose of having a plan, right? So I do, I am prepared to handle certain scenarios. Um, and if it plays out the way I expect, then it'll be fine. If it doesn't play out the way I expect, because sometimes you can't really plan it out, then you just need to be prepared to trust yourself and trust your instincts. So, what I've always told myself and anybody that's worked for me is nothing in the store is more valuable than you. And first and foremost, protect yourself. Nothing is worth protecting in the store. So, literally, if someone comes in a threatening manner or tries to be destructive or whatever the case is, remove yourself first, and then the rest will fall into place later. Now, just please be aware that I don't say this to encourage anyone to come in and do what they do, but because we do have things in place to monitor what's happening in the store. And I have people on call, I have neighbors, there's a lot of things that would prevent this from actually being successful. So, at the risk of sounding like I'm giving you, a path to what you can do to be threatening to me, don't. Don't do it. It's not worth it for you, and it's certainly not worth it for me. So, here's what I want to tell you today. So, there are three scenarios that I'd like to share with you, or three stories from my actual time in the store. I'm not going to mention people's names or specific details just because it's just not important. The important thing is how we react in these scenarios. So, the first thing is several years ago in our neighborhood, there was a series of robberies. And it was during our art walk. So, it was a very busy time in the neighborhood. So, it was really surprising to me that somebody chose that time. And it was early evening, I think 6 or 7 o'clock at night, when we're probably our busiest between the restaurant businesses being active and the art walk going on. But there were a couple of people who chose to um, commit armed robberies in the neighborhood. And one of our dear friends and customers was one of the victims of that robbery. He was mugged and injured in the church parking lot, which is literally, 100 yards away from our store. Now, at the time it happened, we were very unaware of what was going on. We were very busy in the store and did not know of the incident. These perpetrators were eventually caught and convicted of their crimes. But the hardest thing for us was imagining somebody we knew and cared about was affected by this crime. And I guess my first reaction to it was shock and horror. And then when I realized it was so close to where we were and we were actually there and in the store, I thought, what can we do? What could we have done? What would we have done if we had experienced this? Because there were several people that were affected by these robberies, just not our friend and customer, but there were several other people in the neighborhood that were affected. So, you know, I think what it made me realize was that at any given moment, things could change. So there was nothing really I did at that exact time. But later on, when I had the conversation with our friend that was affected by this crime, um, he brought some things to mind. One of the things was that they wanted his car, and that's why they were approached him. And initially, he didn't feel comfortable giving them his keys because he was in shock. He didn't know how to handle the situation, so he initially did not give up his keys right away, and which resulted in him being assaulted. And he's fine, and he ended up eventually you know, going to court and, it was part of the whole court process. But anyway, he is fine. And, but what he told me was very interesting in that the car he was driving was not his. And he felt very responsible for it and that he didn't want to give up somebody else's property. Here's what I learned from that. Nothing I have, nothing in my drawer, nothing in my store, nothing on my personal body, in my car, in my purse is worth holding on to or fighting for. So, but you also have to have some other things in your mind as well. Like your personal physical body self is your most precious gift and you have to protect that. So, and it's really hard for me to tell this story because it was a very difficult time for the entire neighborhood, but in particular for our friend. And, it was difficult to recover from that emotionally and mentally, physically, but he's doing very well. And it was just a great reminder that, very often it would be simpler just to give people what they've come for Now, don't come for anything because you need to know that there are cameras, that there are alarms, there are things in place that would not end well in any respect. Anyway, this is, as you can tell, this is a very difficult video for me to record because I'm being very vulnerable. I'm sharing some things that are very hard to share because they affect me and they affect people I care about. And it also exposes me a little bit to, how my store is set up and the situation I'm in. So I just encourage you just to behave yourself. Anyway, I will continue. I've actually been putting off recording this video for a while now because I wasn't sure how to even share this information, but I think it's helpful. Um, Also, the other thing that comes to mind about that specific story is that, um, be in tune with the neighborhood, be on social media where people are sharing information about the neighborhood, other merchants, other restaurant owners, other residents in the neighborhood. Um, Build relationships. And that's how I eventually heard about what was going on. Is somebody contacted me who also had a business in the neighborhood. So it's key to maintain those relationships. I'm not saying you have to be best buds and go out for coffee every week. I'm just saying let them know that you want to know and vice versa when there's something going on. So it's really important to have that network of people. The second scenario again involved somebody who came into our store on occasion. A very nice gentleman, was a good customer actually. And one day, and I've learned this tip a while ago, that if I hear noise, unusual noise in the neighborhood, um, if I hear something, loud yelling and screaming, or lots of dogs barking, or people yelling, running sounds, etc., talking loudly, I will go to my door and lock it. Whether I see something or not, and usually I don't see something first, I simply lock the door. Because I've learned that um, sometimes just hearing something going on is enough for you to know to take precautions. In this particular case, this person that we knew of who came into the store, I believe had a psychotic break. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but he was a transformed person who I could hear yelling and screaming coming down the street. I didn't know it was him at the time. I just knew that something was going on, and I didn't want somebody coming into the store for whatever reason, you know, seeking a hiding spot or whatever it was. So I immediately went to the door. As soon as I heard the raucousness outside, I went to the door, I locked it. And within 20 seconds of doing that, this gentleman uh, was trying to get in our door, and he was banging on the door with both hands, yelling and screaming. Clearly, a transformed person, somebody we had never seen before, even though we recognized him and knew who he was. But he was trying desperately to get into the door, but he was being very violent. I suspect, there were maybe he didn't have his medications that day, or he was having a psychotic break. But even though we knew him, we knew he was not in a good place. And I don't say this to denigrate him in any way. I've seen him since. He is a kind person, and he was having some kind of break at that day. But I, first of all, thought for sure he was going to break the window on our door. Then he started banging on our window. Then he took all the contents of his pockets, his wallet and everything, threw it at the window, threw it on the ground, and eventually went off and left us. We were so frightened, and I wasn't alone that day. There was somebody else with me, but all I can say is it ended up being resolved. And like I said, I've seen him since, and I am not afraid of him on a normal day. And I'm just grateful that I thought ahead enough to lock the door. Because if he had come in, I'm afraid he would have, at minimum, caused damage in the store. So, anyway, that again, very difficult to share that story because, and it makes me emotional to think that, that mental health was involved. And unfortunately, I'm just glad we protected ourselves in that case. And I just wish the best for him. It was just very unexpected. So I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. I think the key takeaway from that experience was just be aware of your surrounding. It's not just the visual stuff. It's what you hear, and even what you smell. I mean, if you're smelling something unusual, smoke, whatever. Like right now, currently in front of my store, there's been a car parked on the street in front of my store for over a week, and I've called the police because I find that very unusual, especially since there's limited parking in front of our store. So I don't know what that means. It could just be somebody who left their car there for an extended time, but I feel like as a merchant and a business owner in that neighborhood, I care about those people in that place. And I guess if you see something, say something. Okay. So I'm gonna pull myself together. I did not expect to be emotional, but um, a lot of what we see in our neighborhood can be attributed to mental health issues, and I find that heartbreaking in so many ways. So, and the last story, the final one today, and this was the other times I was afraid. Um, this time I felt like was the only time I've ever truly felt threatened in any way. Um, and that was, it was maybe 2 years ago now. It could have maybe a year and a half ago. A gentleman came in my store, and I'm a tall person. I think that sometimes is helpful. I don't look like I'm physically probably easy to take over in some ways, but the gentleman came in was very, very tall. He's like, I would say 6'5", 6'6", big guy. And he came in, he's exhibiting some very bizarre behavior. He went back into our clothing room and he wanted me to come back with him and help him. He was looking for clothing, and I said, I just knew there was something instinctive in me that said, I am not doing that. And you can call it a multitude of things, intuition, just a gut instinct, but I just knew that I was not going back there. And in those cases, I tend to be very overly cautious. And he was continued to exhibit some strange behaviors. He brought clothing out to try on in our clothing room that clearly would never have fit him. When he went back in the clothing room, he, my instinct, again, this was not the plan I would have executed if I had thought about it in advance, but my instinct was to go to my door and stand outside my store. And as I was standing out there, I called a friend, my dear, dear friend Lee. I'm going to get emotional again, but he stayed on the phone with me and I explained what was going on, and I just needed him to stay on the phone. And I stood outside. This gentleman was in the clothing room or in the dressing room, and he was looking through the crack in the door at me. And when I looked back and I made eye contact with him, and he was watching me from inside my store. So I did not go back in my store. And, what I learned from that is I should have immediately called for help because I was just uncomfortable and I didn't need to explain why. I just needed this person. Well, he stayed for a really long time and wouldn't leave. A friend from the neighborhood stopped by with her little dog, and I kept my back to him and I told her what was going on. And she immediately called the police, and the police came right away. But by that time, this gentleman left the store and started walking up the street. And the police were very kind. They said, well, they kept an eye on him, but they said if he comes back, call us. We'll come back again. We'll come back as many times as we need to. And I consider her a hero that day because I was hesitant to call the police because he hadn't actually done anything wrong. And I didn't know what to say if I called the police. Now I have no problem with it. I've learned my lesson. So, but interestingly enough, he did come back again, even after the police had been there and tried to come in the store, and we had locked the door, my friend and her little dog. And he then went away. He didn't really. He turned to come in the door and then realized he was probably making a mistake. So he left, and we made sure he was long gone. But my favorite part of the story is once my friend went to leave, the little dog wouldn't go. He he just sat in the doorway and wouldn't leave. And she kept calling him and trying to coax him, and she said he knows something is not right, and he doesn't want to leave you. Something about animals, they're just miraculous. So, but anyway, the moral of that story is call the police. If you are uncomfortable, call the police. But secondly, I guess I took to heart my own advice and said, nothing is worth protecting in this store. My instinct was to leave because I felt physically intimidated by this person. Um, and even though he didn't actually do anything wrong, I just knew inside something was not right. And this was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My restaurant neighbors were not even open yet, so they weren't even there because they've always been very helpful to me and protective of me. So, anyway, I'm glad she came by. She was an absolute angel that day, and her little dog too. So just keep that in mind. Trust your instincts. Call if you're uncomfortable. Leave if you're uncomfortable. Um, just pay attention to your surroundings, sounds, smells, sights, everything. And that's it for today. I don't hope this wasn't too much of a downer. I just wanted to share my experiences, and I hopefully have gotten smarter over the years, and I hope that you have a really great day. Thanks for watching. Oh, subscribe and like and share if you'd like. Thank you.